Aussie rules football, the one thing that brings more of us together than anything else in this great country. The Victorian Football Association was formed on the 7th of May 1877. This was succeeded by the Victorian Football League in 1896, which was to be the catalyst for football throughout the southern states. So much so that, as we know, most small towns and villages had football teams around country Victoria. Around 1900, football commenced in the Otways, initially scratch matches, before the first football clubs, Lavers Hill and Beach Forest, were formed in 1902. The early 1900s was a period where the Otways was in early development. The timber workers were pushing further into the Otway forests. Small communities were starting to emerge, and obviously a larger number of young men were employed to man the building projects like road making, and railroads needed teams to help with construction. Timber mills were popping up, and of course with this growing population, there was a need for the usual staples in life. Wine bars were the go, and of course pubs and small grocery suppliers. It was inevitable that at some point, football would be a considerable focus. It needs to be remembered that the Otways were quite isolated. The ridge as we know it, and the Gellibrand Valley, were separated by a large stretch of bush, from the open lands to the north. At some point, these small communities scattered through the ranges would be looking for an outlet. Football, more than anything else, suited the temperament of the local communities, players and spectators alike. It provided an outlet for the emotions of those that worked hard in a rather harsh environment, ending a somewhat primitive way of life and perhaps a monotony that needed some relief. Early, football was not for the faint-hearted. Travel was restricted to horseback until the advent of railway along the ridge in 1911, then later truck travel and private cars when the roads were finally improved. Arriving by horse was still occasionally seen right up to the demise of the Otway Association in 1956. Grounds were on any reasonably flat area, the boundary line ploughed, and box or messmate poles for goalposts. These combined with frequent terrible weather made for poor conditions for these early football pioneers. Uniforms for these early teams were based on a near enough is good enough principle. Light or dark colours, and sashes or bands, whatever players could find. Matches between clubs, the first premiership competition started in 1906, and matches between sawmill teams, married and non-married men, junior teams, school teams, and ladies teams made for an interesting makeup of early Otway football. Players' occupants included mill workers, timber workers, dairy farmers, beef and sheep farmers, potato growers, railway workers, school teachers, road contractors, priests, bank managers, bullock team drivers, doctors, and in one case, an undercover detective. One of the first teams to emerge in 1906 was Joanna. You may well think because at least they had level paddock near the ocean to create a playing area. They formed part of the Otway Association. As we know, weather played a crucial role in Otway football. On extreme occasions, rival captains through mutual agreement would decide to play 4 quarter-hour quarters without a break. The hail, snow and horizontal gales that were well renowned in the Otway would make for intolerable conditions with mud and icy winds. The final bell would have been a welcome sound to race off, rub the mud off and head for the pub or wine bar. Wangerip also fielded a team in 1906. They were located on the western end of the ridge. You might think that they played on the Gellibrand River flats close to the river, but further research has revealed there was an oval at Moonlight Heads. The oval was located in the centre of a horse racing circuit and would have therefore been close to the Wattle Hill pub, which would have no doubt been an enjoyable place to wind down after a hard game. This was also close to the Rivernook pub. We have a team photo in front of the Rivernook pub, a perfect location to wet the whistle after a game and celebrate or lick the wounds. Beach Forest must have been a thriving village in the Otways, particularly when the train line was completed to connect there from Colac. A footy team was soon to emerge, as well as the much-needed watering hole, the Ditchley Park Hotel. Footy was played at various sites until the current oval, Ditchley Park, was selected. It apparently was pretty flat compared to the other grounds in the comp. However, the main issue was a patch of bracken fern located in the middle of the oval that had to be removed before the opening game of the season. The process left many sharp stems, and this presented many hazards to a fallen player and could therefore inflict a serious wound. Apparently, this presented no difficulty for the men from the hills. On a bright note, in harsh conditions, halftime would see a club identity with a bottle of sherry. No doubt, this had a very warming effect on the inside. This was repeated at three-quarter time. However, the traditional oranges were included also at this point. Wielangta, another team that sprung up in the height of the Otway boom. As the railway pushed further west along the Otway Ridge, passing through Ferguson and Weeparina, and then on to Wielangta. There was approximately 170 timber workers in the area. This was the makings of some great teams. Wielangta played initially on a ground adjacent to Mrs. Troy's wine saloon. The dressing room were provided by the wine saloon management, but of course, showers were absent. Anyone conversant with climatic conditions in the area would claim nature would provide showers. After the match, players would lope off the ground in very bedraggled, mud-encrusted state. The civilian clothes would be pulled on over football clobber, then off to Mrs. Troy's wine saloon. The offerings consisted of Madeira, port, muscat, Chablis and claret. No beer at this point, as this required an additional licence. However, the proximity of Mrs. Troy's wine saloon to the Oval put an undue strain on many spectators, and the willpower of most was put under intolerable pressure. This state of affairs generated in more activities outside the ground than on it. Fighting broke out between opposing spectators, and this resulted in another oval being hacked out of the bush a good distance from Mrs. Troy's wine saloon. It needs to be noted that Mrs. Troy's management of any unruly behaviour meant that anyone showing a strong sign of being under the weather was only allowed to purchase soup from the bar. Lavers Hill. Although fielding a team in early 1902, there is little to remember them by. It must be remembered that during the First World War and Second World War, most clubs went into recession from 1914 to 1918 and 1940 to 1945. There was no football recorded. And from 1919, football became a popular and regular fixture in the Otway Association. Regular teams are Joanna, Beach Forest, Jellybrand River, Wielangta, Lavers Hill and Carlisle River. Interestingly to note that some of these clubs went into recess at different times, as the number of available players was and still is challenging. Every player supplied his own outfit top to bottom. The club would supply a hammer and a brute last, leather stops, a roll of sticky tape, a bandage and a bottle of iodine. This would be a well-equipped club. Worth noting that in the late 1940s and early 50s, Lavers Hill was a powerful outfit. Jellybrand 1921. This was the first of the regular subsequent annual teams to be formed for serious competitive football. As a member of the Otway Football Association, it's worth noting that the football was played at various paddocks around Jellybrand until the current location was adopted in 1928. The club's colours were black and white. The Wonga Hotel, as it was known, was in place long before the footy team was born, so locals knew exactly where they could gather and wet the whistle in 1898. You could have been excused for asking, did the teams have trainers? Back in those rough and tumble days. Apparently, yes, but from reports, they were a rare treat, and on reflection, that was a blessing. It seemed that irrespective of the injury incurred, the trainer would grab the poor unfortunate by the feet and work the legs with a vigorous pumping action. If he happened to be seriously injured, something that didn't seem to occur to the trainer, these methods could have perhaps proved very serious or even fatal. A preparation known as arnica and a moistened towel played a significant part in the trainer's armoury. Imagine the glistening arms and legs that emerged after several applications of this potion. It's a lifelong memory for many of us. Oh, the smell of that liniment as you step into the change rooms. Love it. Carlisle. First noted football teams at Carlisle were 1912 to 1913. At this stage, games were played at various paddocks around the village until 1928, a more suitable parcel of land was secured and preparations began on a new oval and pavilion. This oval was and is, in many respects, still is the best oval in the Otways because of its location and the abundance of river flats. Carlisle footy team members were from many occupations: dairy farming, road workers, timber milling, and the only butter factory in the Otways. Football, no doubt, was the main sporting focus. And yes, in the very early days, Carlisle did have a pub. And like all waterholes in the Otways, it was the go-to for a celebration or two until it burned down in 1927. Celebrations would no doubt continue. On one occasion, at a football event at the local hall, licensing police raided. However, patrons scattered into surrounding bushland, with police having little success. Later years saw the need for males to have little excuse to have a celebration, gathering around outside the hall between dances. Long necks would appear and were passed around among the gathering until the music started again. Yes, the hard-working lads from the Otways have always enjoyed a little celebration. Carlisle won flags in 1919 and 1928 and was successful again in the 40s premiership in 1940 and 1948, transferring to the CDFL and playing from 1950 through to 1973. Disbanding in 1974, the remaining players joined forces with the Otway Rovers in 1975. Princetown. You may well think it wasn't part of the Otway. However, this is where the Jellybrand River runs into ocean, so it really is the connecting point of the ridge and the river. It wasn't part of the Otway comp, therefore, a number of Princetown team members played roles in some of the Otway teams. It's worth noting that Princetown's original oval was located in the Sandhills, close to Gibson Steps, part of the Glenample Stratton. And this was a shallow valley into a box thorn hedge, and was handy for players to prepare for a match. On one occasion, the sea fog came in and made it difficult in seeing the opposite end of the oval, so some innovative club official decided that if they were to light bark on the point posts, this would assist players in identifying the correct end they were kicking to. On another occasion, the property owner decided he could add some excitement to the game in progress by entering the football oval with his tractor and super spreader to fertilise the oval while the game was being played. Otway Rovers. Otway Rovers formed from the amalgamation of Hill Imperials. Beach Forest and Joanna football clubs tasted instant success when they joined the CDFL in 1957, wearing the famous green and gold jumpers. The newcomers from the bush showed up the Colac clubs, proving the Otway footballers could more than compete. Premiership coach Bob Slocum was rewarded with 44-gallon drum of petrol and 4 gallons of oil for his efforts. Initially forced to play at Jellybrand, later they were allowed to play at Beach Forest, till later in the year the ground became unfit for football and remaining games moved to Carlisle or Jellybrand. Training varied from climbing sand hills at Joanna Beach, indoor sessions at Brown Shed, the old Wellangton ground and Beach Forest. Nothing put these Warriors off continuing their success. Many great players during these years and some continued on to higher honours. Many social events evolved from the introduction of presentation dinners, dances and then cabarets. The side was rejuvenated after the merger with Carlisle, making 2 more preliminary finals and enjoying the improved conditions of the Carlisle ground. Otway Rovers, a club that made the Otways proud. Otway Districts, 1981 to present day. In 1981, the Otway Rovers and Jellybrand merged to form the Otway Districts Football Netball Club. Successes since then include 1982 Otway District Under-16 Premiers, 1996 Senior Netball Premiers, 2000 Otway Under-17 Premiers, 2002 Otway make Senior HMNFL Grand Final, 2011 Otway Reserves Premiers. From 1981, Otway Districts were regaled in purple and yellow jumpers, affectionately known as the Violet Crumbles. In 1994, Otway Districts went into recess, but not to be deterred the next year, they came back in 1995 and joined the H'Bree Mount Noorat Football League, wearing blue and white horizontal stripes as the Kangaroos in the HMNFL. Our 8-season stint in the HMNFL culminated in a grand final appearance against Hastings in 2002. In 2003, the HMNFL disbanded and we returned to play in the Colac Districts Football Netball League and started wearing the current jumpers as the Otway Demons, where our senior footballers initially performed quite creditably before lower ladder finishes in the later seasons. However, the core group have stuck together and the group are determined to climb the ladder. In recent years, we have had netball teams including our strong A-grade team playing finals and grand finals. Looking to the future, the club is looking forward to much improved performances for future seasons, and we are looking forward to strong performances and a supportive club culture on and off the field. We recently completed a major upgrade to the football ground lights and club rooms. These upgrades will ensure that the Otway Districts Football Netball Club continues to be a safe and enjoyable place to play sport and gather as a community. Finally, to fully inform all about the 125 years of Otway football is no doubt a challenging task. However, we have tried to provide an insight into the life of those long-gone warriors and their families. But what remains very obvious is although their lives were a constant struggle, there was and still is a need for social interaction. Football has been and still is the perfect fit for social gatherings in our villages. As you will now understand, there were many football teams that came and are now gone. The Otways were a football competition to themselves that is now past. 125 years have changed many times. This story is a legacy to those who were part of this great Otway region. We are the custodians of the Otway football and netball today. We need to ensure that football remains that social cohesion that keeps the Otways alive. May football and netball continue long into the future. The Otway Districts Football Netball Club, 125 years strong.